You! No!
Oh,
Stop! Stop! He's already dead.
Well, the Cats are behind us, thank God, but we have got the Saints this week on a Friday night at Marvel Stadium, another dead rubber. It is the 60th anniversary of the 1965 Premiership win. I don't know if there's anything official happening about that. I just noticed that it's the 60th anniversary because, well, 1965 is 60 years ago, so I'm assuming they're probably doing something. But yep, 60 years ago in September, the Bombers beat the Saints to win the 1965 Premiership, and we are playing them again on Friday night. Another dead rubber. I don't think these games on the Friday night are all that good for the club, to be honest. People like these games on Fridays and Thursdays because of the extra exposure. I think when you're on a 10-game losing streak, even if you're the sponsors of the club, you probably want the club to get hidden a little bit. I don't think it's really great to be exposed in prime time slots when you're losing. I mean, having said that, we were okay against Geelong last week. They did beat up on us a little bit, but it certainly wasn't the 100-point loss that some were expecting. But it is the Saints this week. And look, the Saints are in reasonable form. They've won a couple in a row. They're going to finish above us on the ladder. They do pretty well at Marvel Stadium. I kind of see them as a bit of a Marvel Stadium specialty team. That's just sort of the way I see them. I guess we're probably the same in some respects. This is the Saints team last week. They suffered no injuries, so I'm presuming they will probably line up in a similar fashion. I don't think there'll be any changes to the team. You can see here the injured players, the players unavailable, but I don't think any of those players will be coming back in for the Saints this week. As for the Bombers, well, we're going to have 3 changes, it seems. Zac Merrett has broken a hand, so he will have to put his 250th game celebration on hold. He will probably have to play that against Carlton the week after. Look, it's normally a 1-week injury. These broken hands, they're not normally that serious, but he will be out of the side. Archer May had a bit of a nasty rolled ankle. We're not quite sure how bad it is at the moment as I'm narrating this video, but look, it looked as though some of the reports were it wasn't as bad as feared, so he might miss a couple of weeks, but I don't think he'll be playing on the weekend. And Dylan Shield was suspended for injuring his own teammate, which I've never seen before. But anyway, so they'll be the 3 players who are out. So who's going to come into the side? Well, Langford, I think, will probably come into the side. I think that's an almost certain inclusion. He's not injured anymore. He played in the reserves. He played pretty well. He played the first 3 quarters before he was rested for the last quarter. He played a little bit in defence. He played a little bit in attack. He was kind of everywhere. He's kind of a nominal replacement for May in the forward line, even though it's not quite like for like. But certainly, I think he will come back into the side. The other 2 players, I think El Hooley, who's been playing pretty well in the reserves, deserves to come into the side. I think he'll come in at least for Merrett. And I think Zach Johnson, of the players, I'm just looking at the players in the VFL, he's probably the player that deserves to come in of the 8 listed players that played in the VFL. Zach Johnson is probably the player that deserves to come in. I think he will be in. So I think it's going to be Zac Johnson, El Hooley, and Langford coming in for May, Merrett, and Shield. Is it possible that Unwin or Gerine make debuts as a 16th debutant? Well, it's possible, but I don't think so. Just because we've got 2 experienced players that have played over 200 games coming out this week, unintentionally coming out, like players that we don't want to come out, Shield and Merrett. So that means we're a young side anyway, but now we're a very, very, very young side. So with 2 200-game players out, Merrett and Shield, I doubt very much whether they will bring in another first gamer. So Langford obviously is a no-brainer just because of his experience, and I just think El Hooley and Zach Johnson, look, we've got to bring in some young players because we haven't got anyone else. But they are the ones who I think just deserve to be rewarded. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Who would you bring in or drop, given that it looks like we're going to have 3 forced changes? By the way, if you like this channel, please hit the like and subscribe button. It only takes 1 second to do so. About 60% of you watching aren't subscribed, so I'd really appreciate it if you could do that right now. So what are we looking for in this game? Well, here are some of the key stats between Essendon and St Kilda. As you can see, the Saints shade us on nearly everything. With the stats, I was analysing these earlier in the year, but given that we've changed the way we play a little bit, I'm not quite sure what how much you can get out of really looking at the numbers. We're a very, very high possession team earlier in the year, and we've really altered that to Brad Scott's credit. Now, Problem is we haven't got the technical expertise to be able to carry it off at the moment. We just don't quite have the players or the ability. But certainly we're not playing. I noticed a change around the Brisbane game about 10 weeks ago, where we certainly were playing a bit more of an attacking brand of football. And certainly that was well to the fore against the Swans, where we had only 46 marks. Swans got like 100 more marks, and yet it didn't really help them in doing so. And I think against Geelong last week, I thought we went backwards a little bit too much, but I don't think that was necessarily due to. I don't think Brad Scott was necessarily telling them to do that. I think it's a case of you're playing against one of the best teams in the competition on their home ground. You've got a young team. Geelong are very, very disciplined with the way they defend the ball. You know, you've got players who are covered further up the field, and you just don't want to make a mistake. So you just end up going backwards because that's just naturally where the next phase of play takes you. I'd just like to see the players really just take it on. I'd like to see Archie Roberts actually move into the midfield. He had 33 possessions on the weekend from the back line. He hasn't really played in the midfield before, not exclusively in the midfield. I mean, everyone's a bit of a midfielder these days to some extent, but like a centre bounce midfielder, like, you know, one of the ones who actually plays in of the four players at the centre bounce. I'd like to see him and McGrath in there at various times on Friday night, because we've got a chance to do it. Merrett isn't going to be there. So what have we got to lose? You may as well throw some of these players in there. I think McGrath is... Look, as a number one draft pick, I would have expected 10 years ago that a player like him would be playing in the midfield, and he's sort of just become a pretty, you know, reliable leadership type, half-back flanker type. But I'd like to see him, you know, really, you know, push the limits and see what he can do in the midfield. I just think that, you know, you may as well try it now. You don't want to be experimenting early next year. You want to be experimenting now. So I'd be playing Archie Roberts and McGrath in the midfield, given that Shield and Merrett are not going to be there. Do I want to win this game? Well, look, I always want to win the game. And I say that because there's a lot of talk about draft picks and things like that. The reality is I don't think that we're going to fall below Richmond anyway. You know, Richmond played Geelong in the last round, so their percentage is going to take a bit of a hammering anyway, and they would need to win a game and then go further ahead of us on percentage. So I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, no, I want to win. I do. There is a bit of talk from people about, you know, wanting an extra position in the draft. I'll just tell you my feelings on that, and some might disagree with this, but look, I'm here to have an opinion, so I'll just let you know what it is. If you look at the retrospective drafts from, say, 10 years ago, and you look at who the best players were from those drafts. So if you redo them, and whoever had the best career, you know, you would redo it and they'd be pick one. And whoever had the second best career, they'd be pick two, etc., etc. It bears almost no resemblance at all to what the actual draft order is. And I get a bit annoyed when I kind of hear people wanting to lose to get one extra pick, to get pick 4 instead of pick 5. And then I look at Geelong on the weekend, who had 6 players who were rookie listed players, who weren't even picked up in the initial phase of drafting. All right, that's a third of their team. And they've been sitting on top of the ladder for 20 years and have not really had any high draft picks at all. So it's just, I don't really think it matters. I think it's too much of a small difference that's almost unmeasurable where one position makes any difference. It just doesn't. And you have to look at the history of the draft. I mean, if you could prove to me that pick 4 was definitely going to be better than pick 5, and pick 5 was definitely going to be better than pick 6, and pick 6 was definitely going to be better than pick 7, then I'd be on board with you. But there's no evidence that any of that is true. I think it's true that on average the top 10 are better than picks 11 to 20, and that picks 11 to 20 are better than picks 21 to 30. I think over the course of 30 or 40 years, that is true. But when you get down to the minutiae of one pick compared to another, 4 compared to 5, I mean, come on, you know, come on. I mean, I can understand wanting pick 4 instead of pick 34. I get that, right? I'd rather pick 11 than instead of pick 28, right? But but trying to predict an 18-year-old whose body isn't fully developed and trying to predict the difference between a pick 4 and a pick 5, I mean, come on. Now, my feeling is just win as many games as you can, see where you finish, and wherever you finish, you just deal with the draft as is. That's kind of the way I look at it. That's just my view. I just think it's too... Look, my view is it's too inexact a science to be wanting to win and lose. And I don't think it's good for the culture anyway. And it just annoys me looking at teams like Geelong that don't have any of these high draft picks that consistently finish ahead of us every year. I would rather be like that. I'd rather be like that than a loser team that's trying to, I'd rather get pick 4 instead of pick 5, as if that even matters, right? But anyway, so yeah, I do want to win the game. But what do I think is going to happen in this game? Well, look, I think we're too inexperienced to get over the line here. I think the loss of Merrett and Shield, even though Shield hasn't been playing that well, the fact that we've got a couple of 200-game players out, I don't think necessarily helps us that much against St Kilda, who've got a reasonable mix. I mean, they're a young team as well, but they're surprisingly mature, I think, the way they play. I mean, they're a very system-based team. Ross Lyon is a very, very good coach, and you know they're going to come out to play, and you know they're going to be playing to win. I mean, the same thing happened to them last year, St Kilda, where they got off to a slow start, and they came home, and they ended up winning about half their games. I think they won about 11 games last year. So it's sort of, going similarly for them, and they're motivated to win. They want to get this done, and I think they're just going to be a bit too good for us. The handicap line with the bookmakers is about 4 goals, which is what I think the margin will be. I'm picking the Saints to win this by 25 points. I think we're going to put in a pretty good effort. We do tend to play better at Marvel Stadium than we do anywhere else, and I think the perfect conditions under there will probably, hold us in good stead. But at the end of the day, I just don't quite think we're going to have the class to get the job done. Big game for a lot of players, as we know. Archie Perkins, we say this every week, he flashes in and out of games. Is he going to have that game where he makes a statement and says, I really want to be with the club, which will take all those talks of trade talk off the table? But, I just don't think he's good enough. Can Jaden Nguyen do another good lockdown job on a St Kilda small forward? Look, he's beaten his opponent 2 weeks in a row. That's been fantastic. He kept Stengel to no goals. Admittedly, Stengel kicked 3 behinds, but look, no goals. Kept Papley to a goal, so we can have a look at Jaden Nguyen and hope he gets something out of the game. Liam McMahon, look, what a game last week. 4 goals under the roof at Marvel Stadium. This is another good opportunity for him to make a statement. I've been all over McMahon. I think he absolutely 100% needs to stay on the list. I think it's vital. I would hate to see a player like that go to another club because he just knows how to kick goals. Some players, it doesn't even require much of a scientific, technical explanation. There are just some players that just get the job done in terms of being able to kick goals. They are just goal kickers. He's got good nous, and he just seems to kick his 2 or 3 goals every single week, whether it be at AFL or VFL level. I'd love him to stay, and I'll be watching him very closely, and I will be at the game as usual. So will you guys be at the game? Will anyone be watching? Does anyone care? Does anyone care about this game? Well, either you do or you don't. Look, it's hard to say, isn't it? I know the result doesn't really matter that much, but look, at the end of the day, there are things to get out of the game in terms of the individual development of players, game style, and all that sort of thing. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'm going to leave it there. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Have a great day, and as always, go Bombers!